All right. Well, being mindful of the time, want to be really respectful of everyone's time here. Super appreciate you all making the time to join us today. We are going to be chatting about kind of advancement in compliance and where compliance and risk management show up in all kinds of industries and areas of business. So, my name is Kelly Rodriguez, and I am the Assistant Dean for Academic Affairs here at Seattle University School of Law. And as a part of my role, I oversee our Master of Legal Studies and our Master of Legal Studies specifically in compliance and risk management. So I've been with the program here for about, oh gosh, over 3 years now, which is kind of a little bit hard to believe. I am an alum of the law school, so I graduated in 2014 from Seattle University School of Law with my JD and a master's in sports administration and leadership. My specific area and kind of the way I come to compliance is through sports compliance. My research is in Title IX, student athlete experience, and some of those areas. But we are going to talk about all sorts of compliance issues and how it comes to a variety of industries and shows up in business. And I'm super excited today to have Jon Lewis join us. He's an alum of our Master of Legal Studies and Compliance and Risk Management program. And I don't recall when you graduated, Jon. I feel like it was just yesterday and also like
Yeah,
years ago.
December of 22.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
Not too
wow.
long.
So our first cohort, yes,
I think we
second.
were second at
Yeah,
least.
second. I
Maybe.
think the first was August.
Mm.
Um, So before I let Jon introduce himself and tell you about his compliance journey and business and whatnot, feel free to drop questions in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat, or there should be a Q&A function, one or the other, both are fine. Would love for you all to engage and ask whatever questions you have, and we'll have some time for kind of questions about the program itself at the end if you like. So yeah, Jon, I would love to turn it over to you. And if you could tell us a little bit about kind of where your career has taken you, both before you entered the program and then where you are now.
Okay. Um, well, my educational background was engineering, and my first job was in the oil fields in California. But then I got married, and that job wasn't real conducive to a married. So we moved up here. I got a job with Boeing as an engineer. And it was a really cool job. It was called engineering liaison. It was out in the factory.
Mhm.
So I was able to climb around in airplanes as they were getting built and troubleshoot problems that came up and design repairs and fixes for them. And it included all the flight test and
Mhm.
things like that. So I did that for the first 11 years. Then I was promoted and went into manufacturing, and I ran part of the Renton factory for 2 years. We installed the interiors of the airplane, so all the carpet and seats and stove bins. And I
Okay.
managed a group of about just shy of 200 people when I first came on, um, and had a layer of management in there as well. So that was my first management job, and I would say I was over my head for the first 3 months. Um, After that, I went into a completely different area called contracts. And at Boeing, we have selling teams
Mhm.
that have technical expertise and kind of legal or contractual expertise. And I was the legal and contractual guy on the selling team. So I spent the next 20 years or so selling airplanes and
Cool.
negotiating the contracts for the airplanes. And it was a pretty cool job. I
Awesome.
got to fly all over the world and meet a lot of very interesting people. Um, but that was my first exposure to like the concept of risk management, and I was focused in contractual risk management. Um, so I did my my career at Boeing. I was looking at retirement, and since I had previously gotten an MBA at Seattle U, and in that process, I was involved with a startup company, and a couple of our first round investors were on the board. So I got experience working with board membership and that interested me in being on a board someday. So as I was looking at what am I going to do in retirement, my plan has always been to be on the board of directors of small or mid-sized companies.
Yeah.
And so as I'm going into retirement, I'm kind of assessing my skills and my suitability, I guess, for that type of a role. And felt like I had a good kind of exterior look um, from a company, at the customer and the market. So kind of looking outward from the company.
Right.
I had good experience with manufacturing, but where I felt like I had a blind spot was in kind of internally looking at the company and the internal governance.
Okay.
And so how policies and compliance to those policies are how boards and executive management kind of manage a company and control, keep the company between the cliff and the fence kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, so I got looking at Seattle U Business School again to see what kind of programs I might be able to use to illuminate that blind spot. And that's when God kind of put the MLS program in my path. And um, the pandemic was like mid
Right. Yeah.
dream. And I thought, I can't watch that much TV. I've got to do something
Mhm.
different. So the MLS program was a good fit. It was all online. And I thought if this pandemic goes on for a couple of years, I need to keep moving forward. And
Right.
being worked out perfect.
No, that's
Graduated December 22, the pandemic was nearly over and I was off and running.
awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. I mean, you mentioned a couple of things, right? So the contracts, like risk management from a contracts perspective, and this will take us into the next slide a little bit. So,
Okay.
but just kind of like what that looks like and how the Masters of Legal Studies and Compliance and Risk Management may be built on or flesh that skill set out a little bit, and then a little bit more about what that looking at the governance internally and kind of how those skills were rounded out for you.
Okay. Well, from a contracts point of view, the terms and conditions in the contract are kind of the first line of defense for protecting the company and protecting the business. Um, and so, it runs a gamut of, defining who's liable if things don't go as described in the contract. Putting those things in the contract eliminates ambiguity. And
Yeah.
so in that way, you are managing the risk that you and
Mhm.
your customer will come to blows someday.
Hopefully not.
No, exactly. You're minimizing that risk. The other terms and conditions include like payment terms. So clearly set expectations in the contract for when payments are due. What's the amount, what's the timing, um, things like shipping, Incoterms, if that's a term that any of you guys are familiar with. But they spell out, say you're shipping a widget to
Mhm.
China. Um, the Incoterms spell out at what point the risk of loss of that
Yeah.
widget transfers to the customer from you as the
Mhm.
manufacturer. So in our case, airplane parts, for example, where we're selling airplane parts, some of them are very, very expensive and very difficult to ship. And so you need to define in the contract the terms of those shipping terms so that you know when your risk is retired and the customer knows when their risk, um, when they are taking on the risk of getting the part into their store. So
Yeah.
some examples of contractual terms that are managing risk. And then another aspect of that job at Boeing was to manage the contracts after they're in place. So we were ensuring that the customers were complying and that Boeing even was complying with the terms of the contract.
No, that's awesome. I mean, I think it's interesting to me how you kind of look at the contractual and very process oriented, very operational lens. And then to take that shift from a board of directors seat, you're looking at business from a completely different lens,
Right.
right? You're very much more, much higher in scope, much more broad, less granular. How has that transition been for you?
That's one of the reasons why, after finishing the MLS program, I didn't put myself out there as a, expert board member
Mhm.
right away. I have wanted to kind of be a practitioner for a little while and, I guess get run over a few times, get some blood on my shoes so that I had that experience.
Yeah.
And, so I've been doing some consulting work for the last
Mhm.
few years with a company that's not in aerospace. They're actually in agriculture over in Yakima. They distribute hops for craft brewing beer
Yeah.
all over the world. And it's been really fascinating to see how general business
Mhm.
insights that I gained throughout my career can be applied in a whole different environment and really bring some value. So,
Yeah.
um, I've raised my horizon up out of the nuts and bolts of the contracting, and I'm helping their chief risk officer implement an enterprise risk management program. So,
That's amazing.
yeah, and it's very broad in scope. So we've been kind of doing projects in intense periods of activity and then move to the next project kind of thing. So everything from um, I worked with finance to help them improve their procure to pay process and
Wow.
um, put policy in place governing, their procurement practices, even down to credit card usage and, who has the authority. That led to some conversations about delegation of authority. And
Yeah.
so, I researched from their bylaws through their board um, resolutions, how they originally conceived their delegation of authority from the board to the executive management down into the management ranks. And, it wasn't written down. People weren't really following what was
Right.
intended. And so I helped them develop a delegation of authority policy that helps them run as more of a mature company than a mom and pop agricultural company kind of.
Yeah. I
So
think what's so fascinating about what you're highlighting is that it's truly like compliance and risk management is so it applies to every industry, and the same skills, that you used as a contract manager in Boeing and then have kind of like those have morphed and changed to apply to this new organization
yeah.
that you're working with, but the thought process and the approach is very similar.
And the problem solving, there are some basic skills like working with a team,
Right.
how to keep people motivated by ensuring they understand the relevance of what
Mhm.
we're doing. Because, initially there's some resistance because it all feels like bureaucracy. But
Right.
you can, it takes a little bit of effort to ensure that they understand the relevance and the importance and how it's protecting the company. And yeah, it's been really fun and interesting the last 2 years.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. And I think, I mean, we kind of have touched on this a little bit, but when I think about, one of the questions I get a lot from students that are considering the compliance risk management MLS, because we've got some focus areas that students can concentrate in, right? So like financial management or compliance, healthcare compliance, those sorts of things. Sometimes it's hard to explain how broad compliance can be, and how these skills really do translate. And I'm curious, I had, oh gosh, Christian Kennedy has had a conversation with us a couple of times, and she always described exactly what you're talking about, the problem solving and working with a team as being like this communications hub, like the compliance officer or the compliance consultant or person tends to be the person who like pulls information from finance and from sales and from
Right,
marketing and you end up being this unique problem solver in the
right.
space, regardless of which problems you're solving.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's a you have a broad look across the enterprise.
Mhm.
And that's it's fascinating, can also be a huge burden, because
Sure.
you
Yeah.
know you're working with the COO and they're so focused on operations that you depending on your relationship, you can just feel like a mosquito that's buzzing around, um, from their
Yeah.
perspective. So that's why it's a challenge sometimes to
Hmm.
um, communicate the relevance and how it's going to benefit the other areas of the company, to implement this credit card policy, or to um, come up with a business continuity plan that sets out what's going to happen if there's some sort of a crisis, that
Yeah.
how are you going to keep the money flowing. So um, it, it's got its tentacles throughout the organization, sometimes so integrated that people don't see that
Yeah.
it's compliance and risk management, uh,
Yeah,
you
for
know,
sure.
some of the processes. So it's really a fun place to operate, though.
I think you highlight something that's funny. It's very like topical right now. I think if done well, compliance and risk management um is a really, I mean, it's looked at as like, oh, the compliance person or legal or whoever is going to come in and like put all this process in place and it's going to slow us down and it's going to all of these things. And I truly think that the opposite is true. If it's done well, it
Mhm.
makes things more efficient.
Mhm.
And it does take some upfront legwork, but when I was having a conversation with our one of our other deans here who works with students and kind of making exceptions, right? For, if for either assignments or like just some of those things. And she said something that was like so poignant. She said, following policy, like we have a really well documented policy, it makes the decision making more equitable because it's really easy if you've got two people coming to you and like one circumstance and there's another circumstance and you're the arbitrator of all of these variations, right? If you have to be that person, of course, your personal feelings, your camaraderie with one person over the other is going to, inform your decision. But if there's a
Mhm.
really clear policy and you know exactly what steps need to be taken, it's more equitable all around, right? Everybody's going to get roughly the same treatment and roughly what they need. So, and it can make that decision-making process so much more efficient.
Yep, it does.
Yeah.
uh, and the in the MLS program, the some of the projects that we did and working in a team
Hmm.
really helped to crystallize some of the how do you give that elevator pitch to a group of managers that you can tell by their body language, they don't want to be in the room.
Yeah.
um, you get to exercise that a little bit through some of the class assignments, and
Hmm.
working with team members and the professors. I mean, the professors are, in many cases, they've been practitioners as well, so they bring a lot of great experience to the table.
Yeah, it's funny. It speaks a little bit to this next slide, but whenever I'm chatting with prospective students, I highlight that we have very much by intention, almost entirely adjunct faculty in this program. And that is because they are literally on the ground. So several of the people who teach in our healthcare compliance courses, electives, they are on the ground working in healthcare compliance every day in their day job. They are the best resources for like what is coming down the pike, like what is happening.
Mhm.
And the other thing that I love about our cohorts, and it's something we really strive to do, is bring together people from different industries
Yeah,
because it's really fun to see how different people and different industries approach the same problem. Um, I'm reminded, think it might have been the cohort before you, but I'm sure you had some overlap in classes. We had a student who, right, you've got your aerospace background. We had a student who works as in shipping and receiving at one of the ports nearby, and managing all of those contracts, right? And speaking about like risk of loss and like what happens when the big container ship comes in and, the or the container is like offloaded, and, who owns the loss at which point, because that can vary by the contract.
Right.
And then we've had two students in the beverage, like food and beverage industry.
Mhm.
Um, one in wine and shipping down in California. And it's just fascinating how all of these industries intersect in
Yeah,
really
they
cool ways.
they deal with some of the same fundamental problems, but they're regulated differently, but they're still
Mhm.
regulated. Um, they're where they're pulling their employees, where they're finding their employees. Some of them, like what I'm finding in the hops business, a lot of really creative artisans involved, whereas my background was,
Yeah,
engineers that had, been in different parts of the company. So um, it's from a compliance and risk management um, career point of view, it puts you in situations that you probably, never anticipated being, and working with people that you may not have been able to work with before. And it just brings I don't know, such a richness um, to my business career. And
yeah.
it's been
No,
wonderful.
that's great. I love that. I definitely want to make sure that I haven't seen any questions pop in the chat yet, but certainly feel free to raise your hand or ask questions. Yeah, it looks like we've got a question from Michael. Go for it. I think, let's see, it looks like you're muted. Go
Can you
ahead.
hear me? Is it better now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, so good. So I think I like the fact, the experience Mr. Lewis shared in terms of how he has, things he had done and how he also progressed from his general engineering background, picking up a
Mhm.
law program. I'm also thinking that we can have things like this, have him come on board. What do I mean? Given a practical event, because some of us might not be from the law
Mhm.
background, and we want somebody who is going to give us that driving force where we can say, okay, yeah, this person has done this before, I can do it. That
Yeah,
practical experience can be competence and capacity for whoever wants to come on board, which I think
right.
is good. I also suggest, this is just my own point of view, if we could have things like this, be maybe do it biannually or quarterly or something. This could be like a motivation factor where, people are more encouraged, wanting to come and take up those courses and, see how they could build up their skills in the law, and which I feel is going to be great. And I also like the fact that I'm also suggesting if you can also pick up a program, maybe like a lecture in the faculty or department, that could be great, because the experience, this vast experience could also help encourage the younger ones like us wanting to take up courses in law.
No, I think you make some really good comments. Thank you so much. The I think I heard from you a couple of things. One, we do have many students who come to this program who do not have a background in law, and it is approachable in that way. It's very much designed to be a program that is for folks in the business world who don't have a background in law, whether that's a bachelor's degree or political science degree or anything like that. We hear from students regularly that the first semester can be very challenging as you're kind of ramping up into studying law, reading cases, especially for our students who are not native to the US, who are not, born and raised and educated in the US. It can be a little bit of a steeper slope. Having said that, I also hear consistently that after that first term, there is it evens out a little bit. It becomes a little bit more manageable.
Yeah.
Um, and then, so I'm going to ask Jon to respond to those comments in a minute. But one of the other things I heard you saying was, and maybe I misunderstood, but I do hear it from our students who kind of work in the field. Um, in some ways, having this compliance hat, wearing the compliance hat, having this skill set is business folks can be more receptive to some of the policies and procedures because you're not a lawyer, right? I'm a lawyer. Everybody freaks out when I enter the conversation. Everybody's like, oh my God, the lawyer is here, right? And gets a little bit defensive about it. So I think we also hear from folks, I'm curious what, Jon, your experience is. Sometimes when you're coming in with the legal knowledge, but without the big lawyer title, it eases that conversation a little.
Yeah, I think so too. What I experienced was when I showed up at a negotiation with a lawyer, the thing they needed to do, I mean, they wouldn't even talk to me until they lawyered up.
Yep.
So um, I think this is an excellent program for business people who want to approach business with a little bit more depth and rich understanding of the legal aspects of business. And it gives you a different or a more varied toolkit to draw from. And you you could find yourself, depending on what level you're operating at eventually, the company's legal counsel, etc. You're more on a peer-to-peer basis, and you're able to translate business needs into legal considerations or vice versa. Bringing the legal concerns into the business conversation in a relevant way, in a way that's not scary for people that don't have a legal background. So you become kind of a bridge, and that's a valuable skill set in any business.
Yeah, 100%. There's another question that came in via the Q&A, and I'll go ahead and take this one because it talks about our on-campus programs, but it offers me the opportunity to kind of highlight some of the differences. So we have several MLS programs in the at Seattle University School of Law. We've got our MLS in compliance and risk management that is fully online. You never have to step on campus. Many of our students choose to come and participate in commencement, but other than that, I mean, there's no requirement to ever be on campus. And in those areas, we do have some concentrations like healthcare compliance, financial compliance, those sorts of things. It's worth noting that you are not required to only take classes in one focus area. You can take classes, any of the electives. So concentrating in one area doesn't really lock you into anything, as it were. We do have some on-campus MLS programs, and there can be a little bit of a hybrid. It depends on where you're located, how close to campus. We do have some students who are in the compliance and risk management program who want to take an elective on campus, and we can totally do that if they're close enough. The question in the Q&A was, if you're looking at the healthcare compliance option with the compliance risk management program, and then we also have a healthcare, an MLS in healthcare online, what are the differences? And certainly these are the types of things I love having conversations with prospective students about this. It's really helpful for me to get to know your goals and whatnot. So I'll reach out personally, make sure we set up a conversation. But as a general answer, there is both a lot of overlap and there can be a lot of difference. The compliance and risk management MLS is a very operational degree. Our students graduate with skills. I hear all the time from our students, I learned this yesterday and I'm applying it next week. They use the skills all the time in their work. The on-campus classes, depending on the class, tend to be a little bit more theoretical, right? You're reading more cases, you're studying about the policy of things. And the assignments are not going to be as tactical or immediately operational as the assignments in our MLS and compliance risk management online. So I can't answer that question fully. It depends a lot on what your goals are, where you see this supporting your career. So would love to have a conversation with you on the side to make sure I can answer your question specifically. But yeah, generally, if you all are thinking about, well, I'm not really sure if I want to pursue one of the compliance programs or want to focus at the on-campus program, we can do a lot within all of our programs. So depending on kind of what the experience you're looking for, there's a lot that we can do to make it tailored to you? Good question, though. I apologize that it was a very kind of lawyer, it depends answer. Um, what's that, John?
It's lawyers for you.
I know, lawyers. I want to be mindful of everyone's time. Certainly if you have more questions, feel free to put them in the chat. For those of you who are looking at applying for our fall 2025 cohort, our scholarship deadline is June 30th. So if you want to be prioritized for scholarships coming up, make sure you get your application materials in by June 30th. Our final deadline for applications will be August 1st. So you've got a little bit of time, plenty of time from now, but certainly that scholarship deadline for many folks is important. Classes begin right after Labor Day, so early September. And I will put up my contact information. Here's our scholarship deadline, classes starting. I'll put up my contact information kind of as we wrap things up here. I have one more question for you, John.
Fire.
If you could go back and tell yourself one thing, inspiration or word of warning, word of caution, prior to starting the program, what would you tell yourself?
Prior to starting this program?
Yeah.
Oh, man. God, I've never really thought of that, as you can tell.
Yeah. I mean, I know it wasn't meant to be like a trip up question. I wonder, I mean, maybe is there like, some folks are like, I just had no idea, how like, Christian Kennedy, and she talks about this in a couple of the webinars I've had with her. She talks about, she had no idea how big the world of compliance was when she started. It was, she was in healthcare, pharmaceutical stuff, and has pivoted a few times. I do have one other question from somebody, so we'll go there and then give you a little bit more time to think. All right, go ahead. Is it Diona? It looks like you're still muted.
My apologies. I raised my hand by mistake.
Oh, no, that's all right. No worries. All right, you didn't get as much time as you thought you were gonna
Yeah,
get.
I think so. He gave me a few seconds.
I know.
I guess I would say it's worth persevering. You know, it's not always the smartest people around that are successful, but it's often the ones that are most dogged and you know they've decided to take a bite out of something and they're not letting go until you know they subdue it. And I saw that, you know, I had an advantage because I was retired and I didn't have a full-time job that I was trying to balance, but it was still a really challenging program. And so, you know, there were times that I struggled with commitment, struggled with the material. But what I saw in my cohort were some really gritty people that were really trying to make a change for them and their families. In particular, several single moms that were in the program, and they're working full time, and they've got kids in elementary school.
Yeah.
And they're just grinding it out, more or less. And I just admired them for their perseverance, and it paid off almost immediately in almost every case, and in every case that I'm aware of, with you know, just because through the course of doing projects and classes, it gave them an opportunity to go to their higher ups and say, hey, I'm taking this class. We have this project. Can I interview you about this project? And the higher ups are like, oh, that's a cool project. And, you know, suddenly you're on their radar. And by the time you finish the program, you don't know what kind of opportunities will have opened up to you. And I saw that happen in almost every case. So it's I don't know. I think I would just tell myself to persevere. It's not going to be easy, but nothing that is worth doing is easy. Otherwise, everyone would do it.
No, you're 100% right. Yeah.
So yeah, just there are going to be times that you're pulling all-nighters and you just got to dig in. You might miss some events.
Yeah.
But in the end, it can pay off from a career point of view and your ability to, build a strong future, a strong career.
Yeah, I think it's important. I do get asked a lot, how much time? And that's a really difficult thing to solidify. We do a lot when we design these courses. We have an instructional design team. They're fantastic, and they do so much work to calculate how much time we anticipate things will take.
Mm.
And we target things to be about, uh, oh gosh, let me do the math. About 15 hours per week is what we are targeting. And that's, most of our students are taking about 5 credits per semester, and that's 3 hours per credit per week. So 15 hours roughly. Having said that, I am a really, like, reading is challenging for me. It always has been. Reading cases was really challenging for me to learn how to do. And so I do see students, some students are taking a lot longer. They're up in the 20 to 25 hours a week range, especially in those first couple of terms as they're getting used to it.
Yeah.
And those are the points where I really encourage students, like, reach out to me. I'm the advisor for all of our MLS students. I end up getting to know folks really well. It's I've loved getting to know Jon and some of his cohort mates over the last couple of years. And I've been there. I went through law school with a couple of kids also, and it's super doable. We just have to be strategic about how we're approaching the work. And making sure, that we stay on top of things and all those things that you would, that you're supposed to do. And sometimes it just gets challenging in the middle of it. So
Mm.
no, I think that you're right, Jon, like one foot in front of the other.
And fortunately, there aren't nearly as many case studies this program as there are in law school.
Yeah, it's just
Very
different. It's
few.
so different. I'm reminded of this. There's this one exercise that our students do in our Foundations of Regulatory Compliance class that I love, and it highlights so much the difference between an MLS and a JD. You take a statute and you break it down into a whole bunch of component parts, and you make this big spreadsheet, with the US code and the public law and the which agency oversees it, and the carrots and the sticks and all of these things. And then the job is to, at the end of the semester, you take that and you create a communication strategy, right? A presentation to communicate that out to stakeholders. Like, fascinating, awesome, awesome assignment. And I graduated with a JD 10, 15 years, I don't know, 12 years ago now. And I would not have been able to do that after graduating with a JD. Like, it's just such a different type of degree program.
Mhm.
And the MLS is so tactical, so operational in a way that really lends itself to work well in business.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
thank you, Jon, so much for your time. I really, really appreciate your candor and your engagement. You've been such a great friend and alum to the program. For
Thank
the
you.
rest of you, thank you so much for joining us. My contact information is there. Feel free to reach out. And if you have any other questions or want to chat one-on-one, I'm happy to make the time. So thank you again, Jon. Thanks so much for being here.
Okay. Yeah. Take
Yeah.
care.
Thanks. Talk to you all soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.